Welcome to the Deep Dive, the show where we take a sack of fascinating sources and really try to pull out the absolute gold for you.
That's the plan.
Today we're plunging into the extraordinary legacy of, well, a single city. One that really kicked off so much of what we think of as fundamental to Western thought, art, even democracy itself.
Yeah, we are talking, of course, about ancient Athens, a
Exact, yeah.
city-state whose influence, I mean, it still reverberates today, doesn't it,
Yeah.
millennia later?
It really does.
So for this deep dive, our mission is basically to explore how Athens went from being, a significant regional player to this unparalleled cultural powerhouse.
Right. How did that happen?
We're going to look at the key moments, the specific factors that led to its, frankly, astonishing golden age, and then also, crucially, its complex and maybe even inevitable decline. It's a story packed with some surprising facts and I think some profound lessons.
And our source material for today, it comes from excerpts called The History of Western Philosophy, Athens in Relation to Culture. These texts give us this really rich historical and philosophical lens. It's a unique perspective, I think, for understanding Athens' profound and lasting impact.
Definitely.
So our mission for you, the listener, is clear. We want to pull out the most important nuggets of knowledge, the key insights from these pages. We want to give you a crystal clear understanding of what made Athens so special, why its achievements were so incredibly significant, and maybe most importantly, what vital lessons its story holds about the whole nature of these, golden ages.
Yeah, what makes them tick and what makes them, well, stop ticking.
Exactly.
Okay, so let's start at the beginning. The root of Athenian greatness. Because the sources, they make it really clear that his rise wasn't just like a spontaneous thing or a lucky break.
No.
It was forged. Forged in the crucible of intense conflict. Specifically, those two defining Persian wars. This wasn't just about survival, It was about the birth of an identity.
Absolutely. The sources pinpoint this really clearly. Athenian greatness, it truly begins with these two monumental clashes. First, Persian War, 490 BC, and then the second, about a decade later, 479 BC.
Mm-hmm.
And these weren't just, isolated battles, they were existential threats. But paradoxically, they ended up galvanizing the entire Greek world, and maybe especially Athens, laid the groundwork for everything that followed.
Precisely. That initial victory against, well, the mighty Persian king Darius at Marathon, 490 BC, that was an absolutely pivotal moment.
Huge.
I mean, just try to imagine the psychological impact on the Athenians. You have this relatively small Greek force, mostly Athenian soldiers, hoplites,
Right.
and they stand firm and they decisively defeat the seemingly invincible Persian Empire right there on their own land.
On Attic soil, yeah.
It wasn't just a tactical win. It
Yeah.
was this profound assertion of their independence,
Yeah.
a declaration of their distinct identity against this overwhelming foreign power. It must have instilled an incredible sense of self-belief, of unity that hadn't really existed on that scale before.
And if Marathon was the opening act,
Yeah,
then Salamis, well, that was the showstopper, the ultimate validation of their newfound strength.
right. 10 years later, 480 BC, Xerxes, Darius's son, he comes back. Bigger force, even more intimidating.
Sweeps through northern Greece, even captures Athens itself, burns it.
Yeah, devastating. But then the combined Greek fleets, and this is key, spearheaded by Athenian naval power and the strategic genius of Themistocles.
Themistocles, right.
They triumph against Xerxes' massive navy in the narrow straits of Salamis, a brilliant naval victory.
Saved Greece, essentially, turned the whole tide of the war.
It really did. And the historical accounts, they really emphasize that these victories, Marathon and Salamis, they were so much more than just military successes. They were, like you said, psychological turning points, political turning points. They definitively forged that Athenian identity, instilled this deep resilience, this collective destiny, and crucially, established Athens' undeniable leadership among the other Greek states. It's hard to overstate the shift in self-perception that must have happened.
You go from being one city among many to the city that saved Greece.
Exactly. And what's fascinating here is how these defensive victories, they almost seamlessly transition into Athens' offensive power. It leads straight into this remarkable imperial expansion.
Okay.
This newfound prestige, this naval superiority, it positions Athens as the, quote, preeminent partner in the alliance formed right after the wars to keep fighting Persia.
The Delian League.
The Delian League, exactly. And it started with a seemingly straightforward deal. Member states contribute either ships or money for collective security. Simple enough, right?
Okay, let's unpack this, though, because what starts as this alliance for mutual defense? Well, it quickly morphs, doesn't it?
It absolutely does.
What?
Athens, as the leader, gradually acquires total naval supremacy. They're building and running the biggest, best fleet in the Aegean.
Hmm.
And with that power comes, well, first a subtle, then a not-so-subtle assertion of control over its allies.
Right. Those contributions, ships or money, they start looking less voluntary and more like tribute.
Precisely. They become mandatory. And if any member state tried to leave the League, Athens used force to keep them in.
So what began as this coalition of equals or near equals slowly but surely transforms into the Athenian Empire.
Yeah. And this imperial expansion was absolutely critical. It wasn't just about political dominance, though that was part of it. It had massive practical implications that directly fueled Athens' golden age.
How so?
Well, it provided Athens with a steady stream of resources. You've got financial contributions, basically tribute from its allies who were becoming more like subjects.
Right.
And you've got raw materials needed for their booming economy. It also supplied manpower, Athenian citizens in the Navy, but also drawing on allied populations. And of course, it gave them immense political leverage and control over trade routes across the Aegean.
So if we connect this to the bigger picture, this foundation for unprecedented prosperity, it was a direct result of that shift, alliance to empire.
Absolutely. It fueled the conditions for the cultural explosion that followed. It's kind of a classic example, isn't it?
Yeah.
Military success inadvertently laying the groundwork for cultural flourishing, something the original fighters probably never even imagined.
And what an explosion it was. Which brings us right into what our sources call the happiest and most glorious time in Athens history.
The age of Pericles.
Roughly 460 to 430 BC. And at the heart of it all, of course, was Pericles himself. The historical accounts highlight his, quote, wise leadership for about 30 years right up until his fall and death in 430 BC, often described as the absolute pinnacle of Athenian achievement.
So, okay, wise leadership. What did that actually mean back then in practice?
Good question.
It meant orchestrating this period of immense growth, stability, but crucially, also investing heavily in the public good, in culture. Under Pericles, Athens truly became rich and prospering, not just the treasury, but daily life. His vision wasn't just about military might or political control, though he was good at those two. It was fundamentally about rebuilding, beautifying, elevating Athens to an unparalleled status, making it the cultural and intellectual envy of the whole Greek world. He got that a city's greatness wasn't just armies, it was ideas, art, public spaces.
And rebuilt, he absolutely did. I mean, our sources remind us of the massive devastation Xerxes caused when he captured Athens.
Burned the Acropolis temples right down.
Deliberately demolished them. So Pericles spearheaded this incredibly ambitious, breathtaking reconstruction effort, using partly funds from the Delian League.
Ah, yes, the Allied funds.
Right. And this wasn't just repair work. It was a grand architectural statement designed to proclaim Athens' renewed power, its religious devotion, its sheer wealth.
They're talking the Parthenon.
The Parthenon, that iconic symbol of classical architecture, a temple to Athena Parthenos, designed with these incredible optical refinements so it looks perfect to the human eye.
Amazing technical skill.
And numerous other temples, public buildings all over the Acropolis in the city. And to really embody this renewed spirit, the famous sculptor Phidias was commissioned.
Phidias, yeah.
Created these colossal statues of gods, including that massive gold and ivory chryselephantine statue of Athena inside the Parthenon itself.
Wow, gold and ivory. Imagine seeing that.
It was a physical manifestation of their comeback spirit, their cultural pride.
In this reconstruction, it was just a profound testament, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Not just to their resilience after being destroyed, but to their ambition, their resources.
Yeah.
It physically embodied their renewed spirit, their wealth, their pride. The whole landscape of Athens was transformed into this monument to their achievements. It created this magnificent backdrop for all the other flourishing stuff we're about to talk about, basically setting the stage for one of history's most amazing cultural blooms.
Okay, and here's where it gets really interesting, I think. Our sources point out something fascinating. Before this golden age, Athens, well, it was a respectable city-state, sure. It had not lagged behind many other Greek cities, as the text says. But frankly, it had produced any great man in art or literature, except maybe Solon, the lawgiver, centuries before.
Yeah, Solon was more statecraft than art.
Exactly. But suddenly, under this powerful stimulus of victory, wealth, and reconstruction, as the text puts it, Athens just explodes, becomes this hotbed of unparalleled artistic, literary achievement, attracting talent from all over the Greek world.
It's almost like the collective trauma and then the triumph just unleashed this incredible creative energy.
It really seems like it.
The conditions were just ripe for this explosion of genius. You have this concentration of resources, talent, a shared sense of purpose.
Yeah.
It spurred this incredible creative burst, touched every aspect of intellectual and artistic life.
Okay, like what specifically?
Well, take history. The discipline itself was basically invented then.
Yeah.
You have Herodotus.
The father of history?
Right. Now, interestingly, he was an Athenian himself. He was from Halicarnassus in Asia Minor.
Oh, okay.
But he lived in Athens for a good while, and he wrote his massive histories, his big account of the Persian Wars, from a distinctly Athenian viewpoint. Interviewing people, looking at sources critically, he transformed simple storytelling into this rigorous investigation of the past, looking for causes and effects.
Wow. And then there are the performing arts. This period was the absolute peak of Greek tragedy, a form that still hits hard today.
Absolutely. The big three.
The Titans, Aeschylus, who actually fought in the Persian Wars.
Imagine that experience fueling his writing.
Right. And his play, The Persei, looks at that very conflict, but from the unique perspective of the defeated Persians, exploring themes like hubris, divine punishment.
Fascinating perspective.
Then there's Sophocles. His Oedipus Rex is just a masterclass in dramatic irony, human fate. And Euripides, known for his more psychologically complex characters, often challenging the traditional myths.
More radical, maybe.
A bit, yeah. Their plays explored these incredibly profound human themes: fate, justice, morality, the limits of human action, suffering. They really shaped dramatic forms that still influence theater today. They weren't just entertainment. They were like public forums for digging into the deepest philosophical, ethical questions of their society, often grappling with things like Pericles' fall, the Peloponnesian War, reflecting the anxieties of their own time.
And it wasn't just all serious tragedy, right? There was comedy, too.
Oh yeah, comedy found its voice big time in Athens with Aristophanes, the comedic poet. His plays, as the sources note, made fun of all forms. They were sharp, satirical, often targeting prominent figures, that Socrates got skewered.
Yes, famously.
Politicians like Cleon, even popular playwrights like Euripides himself, with biting wit and often pretty crude humor, too.
Which suggests something interesting about Athenian society, doesn't it?
Yeah.
This remarkable openness to satire, to self-critique.
Definitely. A society confident enough to laugh at itself, to allow public scrutiny of its leaders, its institutions. It reflects that skepticism, that critical thinking that really characterized the later part of the Golden Age. It's pretty amazing to think of such open criticism happening in, essentially, a public festival.
Quite astonishing.
Yeah.
And we can't forget the visual arts either.
Absolutely not. The sources keep reiterating the unparalleled architects and sculptors who left this enduring legacy. Beauty, technical mastery, their work still inspires awe.
Beyond Phidias, you had masters like Praxiteles, Lysippos. Their innovations in showing the human form, they influenced art for centuries afterwards.
It truly makes you wonder, how could such a concentration of genius across so many different fields exist in one place at one time?
Yeah, which brings us to a really fascinating point about the population, the sheer density of talent.
Right. Our sources estimate the city itself had maybe 230,000 people, including a lot of slaves, of course.
And maybe another 20,000 or so in the surrounding area. Attica, not a huge number by modern standards.
No. But the sheer remarkable proportion, as the source says, of these inhabitants who achieved the highest level of work or excellence, it's truly astonishing.
It wasn't just a few isolated geniuses dotted around. It seems like it was a societal environment that somehow fostered and rewarded excellence across multiple domains: statesmanship, philosophy, architecture, drama.
It speaks to some kind of underlying cultural infrastructure, doesn't it? Something that enabled such widespread achievement.
It really does.
Okay, speaking of domains, let's pivot a bit. From the artistic and architectural genius to the realm of thought. Because Athens truly became the birthplace of Western philosophy, the crucible where systematic reasoning really started to take shape.
Yeah, this is huge. The historical accounts make it clear that Athenians were, quote, eagerly open to teachers from other cities. They were genuinely interested in philosophy, even in its early stages under Pericles, way before the really big names emerged.
What's fascinating there is how that intellectual curiosity, that openness, created such fertile ground for new ideas, for different schools of thought.
Exactly. Unlike maybe some other cultures that might have resisted foreign ideas or been closed off, Athens actively sought them out.
Right.
This intellectual hunger transformed the city into the central hub where philosophical inquiry could really take root and flourish. They didn't just tolerate different views, they engaged with them, debated them, built upon them, create this vibrant marketplace of ideas.
And among these early philosophical figures, two names really stand out as the great names of Athenian philosophy. Their impact is just immense even today.
Socrates and Plato.
Socrates and his student, Plato. Socrates, in particular, he pursued his youth and early manhood under Pericles, learning, developing his groundbreaking approach of rigorous questioning.
The Socratic method.
Right. But before these giants fully dominated the scene, there were the sophists.
Ah, the sophists. Often get a bad rap, but they were important.
Our sources describe them as these influential teachers, sought after by young men, eager to learn the art of disputation. Basically, how to argue effectively, persuasively in public life, which was crucial in a democracy.
Absolutely. The sophists were critical in preparing the intellectual landscape, even if later philosophers like Plato often took issue with them.
Yeah, Plato wasn't a fan.
No, but they taught rhetoric, critical thinking, how to argue effectively, skills that were incredibly valuable in a direct democracy that relied so heavily on public debate. In the assembly, the law courts.
Right. The sources even mention an example from one of Plato's dialogues, the Protagoras. It gives this amusing satirical description of these arrogant disciples following a sophist around. It gives you a real flavor of the intellectual climate, this burgeoning field of rhetoric.
It shows intellectual inquiry becoming like a profession almost. And it also highlights Socrates' own journey. He learned initially from figures like Anaxagoras.
Anaxagoras?
Yeah, he introduced this radical idea of the preeminence of mind in creation. Nous, or mind, as the organizing principle, a concept that profoundly influenced Socrates and later Plato.
Okay. And then came Plato, a figure whose monumental impact on Western thought, I mean, you just can't overstate it.
Truly foundational.
His dialogues, as our source notes, they often give an agreeable picture of life among the rich and are supposed to take place during the time of Pericles, even though Plato himself grew up later, during a period of decay after the Peloponnesian War.
That contrast is really interesting, isn't it? His formative years were watching Athens decline, but he sets his dialogues in this earlier, maybe idealized golden age. Suggests a kind of wistful look back, maybe. A search for greater moral and intellectual clarity.
Could be, and his background matters too.
Definitely. Plato came from an aristocratic family. And this context is important for understanding the conditions that let his philosophy flourish. He was part of a class where young men, frankly, had no need to work.
Leisure time.
Right. They could spend their leisure in the pursuit of science and mathematics and philosophy. This economic freedom was a critical enabler for deep, sustained intellectual exploration.
They weren't just idle rich, though.
No, not at all. They were intellectually engaged, participating in debates, going to lectures, grappling with profound questions. The sources also note they knew Homer almost by heart.
Wow.
And were practical judges of the merits of professional reciters of poetry, which indicates a society that deeply valued intellectual pursuits, literature, critical engagement with texts, just the perfect incubator for philosophical innovation.
And maybe the most significant intellectual leap during this whole era, truly foundational for Western thought, was what our sources call the discovery of deductive reasoning.
Yeah, moving beyond just observing the world to building logical arguments from principles.
A revolutionary way of thinking. The sources also talk about the excitement of new theories, leading to this twofold field of knowledge where knowledge was both understood and applied.
Right. It wasn't just abstract navel-gazing. It was about taking abstract principles and applying them systematically to ethics, to politics, to logic itself.
This raises an important question, though. How did this holistic approach emerge, where theory met practice?
Well, it seems like it was this unique combination. You had the sophists focusing on argument, Socrates relentlessly questioning assumptions, and then Plato trying to systematize thought, seeking universal truths.
All happening in a society that valued and enabled leisure for this kind of thinking.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It created an environment where inquiry wasn't just encouraged, it was actively pursued by the brightest minds, laying the groundwork for Western philosophy as we know it, moving from just observation to reasoned argument, logical conclusion.
Yeah.
This holistic approach, applying philosophy to practical living, became a real hallmark of Athenian thought.
But as incredible and vibrant as this golden age was, our sources are really clear that the whole thing, the balance of forces that produced it, was inherently precarious.
Yeah, fragile. delicate even.
It was threatened both from within by the nature of its own democracy, the internal tensions,
Yeah.
and from without by its big rival, Sparta.
So what does this tell us about golden ages in general?
Good question.
It means that even at its absolute peak, the Athenian Empire, for all its brilliance, carried the seeds of its own instability, that very democratic system that fostered so much freedom. It also contained internal political tensions, factionalism, especially as the empire grew, bringing in more wealth, new challenges.
And external.
Externally, the imperial expansion that fueled its prosperity inevitably created deep rivalries, most obviously with Sparta, leading to this almost constant interplay of internal politics and external threats that ultimately just couldn't be sustained. It's a powerful lesson, I think, about the fragility even of peak periods of human flourishing.
Okay, let's dig into some of those internal factors, the ones contributing to this precarious balance. Our sources paint this picture of Attica changing dramatically, from originally being a self-supporting little agricultural region, mostly growing grain,
Subsistence farming, basically.
into this large, bustling capital city with a rapidly growing population of artisans and skilled artificers. That demographic shift alone must have introduced new dynamics, new social classes, new demands on the political system.
Absolutely. The whole economic foundation shifted significantly. You see this gradual but profound transition away from grain towards more profitable cash crops, like vines and olives.
Wine and olive oil, big exports.
Exactly. Now, this brought greater wealth to some, but it also required more capital for investment. And crucially, it often led small farmers into debt. They struggled to compete or adapt.
Creating social tensions.
Significant social and economic stratification, which became a growing source of internal tension within a democracy that was, ideally, supposed to represent everyone's interests. And the rising wealth also fueled consumerism, luxury, widening the gap between rich and poor even more.
And this economic evolution, it's tied inextricably to Athens' complex political history. The sources trace it way back, from monarchy in the Homeric age, legendary kings, to gradually transitioning to an aristocracy, power held by a few noble families. Then came Solon's big compromise in the 6th century BC.
Solon's reforms were crucial.
Introduced significant changes that moved Athens decisively towards democracy, broadening participation, limiting aristocratic power. And thankfully, his work survived through the period of Pisistratus and his sons, even though they were tyrants. It set the stage for later democratic development.
And then, after the tyranny ended, here's a fascinating twist. It was the aristocrats themselves, surprisingly, who opposed the tyranny and actually recommended themselves to democracy.
Why would they do that?
Well, they probably saw it as a way to regain influence after the tyrants were gone. It shows how adaptable political elites can be. Our source even draws this curious parallel, noting that democratic processes gave power to the aristocracy in 19th century England.
Really?
Yeah, highlighting that democracy doesn't automatically mean power for the common person. It can be leveraged by elites. A theme we see in ancient Athens, too, where powerful families still wielded considerable influence within the democratic system, shaping policies.
Okay, so you have these internal shifts, economic changes, political maneuvering. But that's only part of the story, right?
Right. The very imperialist policy of Athens, the one we talked about earlier, it was deeply bound up with its economic prosperity.
The empire funded the Golden Age?
In large part, yes.
Yeah.
It provided the resources, the secure trade routes, the sheer wealth that fueled those grand building projects, the cultural stuff. But that same policy, that relentless expansionist drive, almost inevitably caused increasing friction with Sparta.
The big rival.
Sparta, with its conservative land-based military power, just saw Athenian naval and commercial expansion as a direct threat to its own traditional dominance in the Peloponnese. They were bound to clash.
And that friction escalated into
the devastating Peloponnesian War, a long, brutal conflict, 431 to 404 BC.
decades.
Yeah. And this epic struggle ultimately saw Athens defeated, its walls torn down, navy disbanded, empire gone.
Which raises that crucial question for analysis. How did Athens' own success, its expansion, the very things that made it so powerful and prosperous, how did they contribute directly to its downfall?
It's a classic case, isn't it? Unchecked power leading to overreach, conflict. It offers these profound lessons about the sustainability of empire, the dangers of hubris. The very engine of their greatness, naval supremacy, imperial ambition, became the mechanism of their demise, drew them into a war they couldn't ultimately win.
Yeah. Even with this profound political and military collapse, the story of Athens doesn't just end there, especially not the intellectual legacy.
No, not at all. This is maybe the most remarkable part.
Our sources emphasize that despite the defeat, the loss of empire, the prestige of Athens survived. Its intellectual leadership, especially in philosophy, remained centered there for almost a millennium after its political and military power faded.
It's truly astonishing. A city loses its empire but keeps its intellectual crown. Speaks volumes about the enduring power of ideas, doesn't it?
It really does.
While other cities, like Alexandria later on, might have eclipsed Athens in mathematics and science during the Hellenistic period.
Becoming new centers for scientific research.
Right. But the sources reaffirm that Plato and Aristotle made Athens philosophically supreme. Their ideas, their schools of thought, the tradition they establish, it was so robust, so foundational, it transcended the city's political fortunes. Athens remained the place to go for anyone seeking philosophical wisdom, a pilgrimage site for the mind.
And these institutions, they founded Plato's Academy, Aristotle's Lyceum. They weren't just fleeting trends.
No, incredibly long-lasting,
Yeah.
hugely influential centers of learning. They survived all other schools, persisted as intellectual beacons for centuries, even as the Roman Empire converted to Christianity.
Right. For 2 centuries after the empire converted, they remained this island of paganism, preserving classical thought and inquiry in a world increasingly dominated by a new faith, until their eventual closure by the Byzantine Emperor Justinian in 529 AD, due to what our source bluntly calls religious bigotry.
Yeah. That act, often seen as a symbolic and very real endpoint for that continuous line of classical philosophical inquiry. It directly contributed to the cultural and intellectual stagnation, often called the early Dark Ages in Europe.
So if we connect this to the bigger picture, closing down these vital intellectual hubs had profound, lasting implications for the whole trajectory of knowledge, intellectual progress in the West.
It really underscores how vulnerable even the most enduring ideas can be to shifts in political and religious power. How a single act of closure can echo for centuries.
Yeah.
A sobering thought.
What an incredible journey we've taken today, though. We've traced the remarkable rise of Athens from a city-state defined by those hard-fought victories in the Persian Wars.
Victories that forged its identity, gave it that crucial confidence.
We saw how it transformed into the undisputed cultural intellectual capital of the Hellenic world, highlighting the specific factors that post-war reconstruction, Pericles' leadership-wise, may be controversial sometimes, and that unique confluence of wealth, imperial power, and deep intellectual curiosity.
And then we explored the eventual complex decline, driven by those internal tensions, economic shifts, social stratification.
And the external pressures, imperial overreach leading to that devastating Peloponnesian War.
It shows how deeply intertwined political power, economic stability, and cultural innovation really are, and how even the most brilliant civilizations can harbor the seeds of their own undoing.
This deep dive into Athens, it really feels like so much more than just ancient history. It's about understanding the very foundations of Western thought, art, governance, things that continue to shape societies right now.
Yeah. Exploring such a concentrated period of brilliance and its complex end, it helps us appreciate the inherent fragility, the interconnectedness of societal flourishing.
So as we close this deep dive, we want to leave you, our listener, with a thought-provoking question, something to mull over. Given Athens' extraordinary experience, its rapid rise, its unparalleled cultural output, its eventual decline despite its enduring intellectual prestige, what are the inherent tensions, the precarious balances within our own modern golden ages, whether they're technological, economic, cultural?
Good question. What unseen forces might be shaping their eventual trajectory?
Exactly. And what lessons can we really draw from Athens about the enduring impact of ideas and institutions versus just political and military might? How do we ensure that the flourishing we see today has a long, sustainable future, learning from the triumphs and the tragedies of the past?
It's a powerful question, and one that definitely resonates when you look at the long arc of history. Reminds us that no golden age lasts forever.
Seems that way.
Well, thank you for joining us on this deep dive. It's been fascinating.
It really has. Until next time.